Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started, you guys. Thank you guys for coming. We will introduce ourselves and then just do a quick little run through of who you are and who you're affiliated with. I think that'd be a cool, and how many fosters you have. That's a pretty good little.
Fair question.
And if it's 0, that's okay. After this, you may feel more confident getting some. My name is Anthony Rodriguez. I'm a certified trainer and behavior consultant. I work sometimes at Shelby Humane. I teach group classes, I do private lessons, and I have 5 fosters right now at the crib. We'll talk about them in a little bit. To my left.
Meredith Dempsey. I'm also a certified canine behavior consultant, and I also work with Shelby sometimes. My weeks now are spent doing largely board and train for dogs that have fear aggressions, and it seems to be the most common out of my home. I also do in-home lessons and just general boarding. I don't want to tell you how many fosters I have. I guess I'm a good company.
This is
No judgment here. And it's not a competition either.
7 foster dogs with 3 different organizations: Shelby, 2x2, and Silicata. Most of them are feral dogs, and the other ones are like hyperactive pit bulls, and they all play together. So I have a huge play group every day. So much fun.
In-home daycare.
Yeah, but I do not offer daycare services. I like to specialize in boarding dogs that are so fragile that they don't do well in larger kennel settings. So, yeah, the aggressive ones are the really anxious ones are the ones that I like to take.
Well, we got a big crowd, but thank you guys for coming. I think it's going to be pretty informative, hopefully fun, and towards the end we'll open the floor for questions. And if you have something specific you want to ask, we'll go there. But the way we're going to break this up is I'm going to talk about multi-dog management. In other words, I told you guys I have 5 fosters at the house, and then I have a 6th dog, my personal dog, and they all live separately. So I'll talk about managing them, how to keep them all entertained and live a happy life and safe. And then Meredith will go off on talking about integrating another dog into a current home situation and how to introduce them, how to just go in that road. So we have 2 different styles of fostering. There's not one style that works, you know. It's just like working with a dog. You know, Angela's a trainer too. A few trainers may do something a little bit differently. It doesn't mean that there's a right or wrong. It's just recognizing what your resources are, what your experience is, what you're capable of, and also recognizing what you're not capable of, you know. I think that's super important, especially with a community like this, recognizing that if you feel that you've bitten off more than you can chew, reach out, you know, because we're all there to help each other, you know. And Meredith and I have co-parented a lot of dogs where she'll call me and say, you gotta come get this one, right? Or she'll show up and say, here's this one.
No, I've never done that before.
My first foster, okay, I started I never fostered until last year. And she calls me one night and says, I got a dog, can you take it? If you ask me if I can take a dog, no is not probably ever going to come out of my mouth. But that choice right there, out of my mouth, you know, exactly. I will try. I will always try it, you know. And there's a big learning curve to fostering, you know, and that's something to keep in mind because the dogs are going through an adjustment period just like you guys are. When I take a dog in, or if any of us take a dog in, the first few days, 0 expectations from this dog. In fact, you know, I have a space in my garage that kind of isolates them from all the just drama in the house itself and lets them just decompress. You know, you have to recognize whether they're coming out of a shelter environment, potential animal control, getting caught as a stray environment, maybe another home, maybe a medical quarantine or a medical hold at a vet's office. You have to recognize that they're coming from a very emotional situation. And recognizing that from the dog's point of view can help us put them in a situation where they can finally rest and decompress. That is huge. And I think, especially if you've never met this dog before, if you don't have a relationship with this dog, you don't want to put them in a situation where it amplifies the stress they're probably already experiencing. I actually had somebody contact me me today about wanting to meet their dog to meet a new foster who has been through the ringer of different locations and all. And I said, take it easy. I said, there's no rush to integrate dogs, at least not right now for this specific dog. You know, every case and situation will be different, but recognizing that is super important. Because, like I said, different styles of fostering both lead happy lives for the animals, but what works for me may not work exactly for you. But I'm here to share my experience and how I manage the dogs at my house.
Can I interject?
Yes.
So I used to work with Shelby Humane as the foster volunteer coordinator, and so I had, for those of you that said we were foster coordinators, I remember, it is a huge headache when someone says, yes, I'll take this dog, and then 24 hours later they return it for going through the garbage or ripping the blinds or eating the turkey off the table. And so I think another big thing for fosters to know, and a lot of you have already been here, you're veteran fosters, so you probably don't fall susceptible to this, but any negative behaviors you see within the first 3 to 7 days, like a growl at your other dog or a growl at your kid, try not to take that and run with it and say this is the way the dog's going to be for the rest of the time. Like, give them a couple extra chances depending on the severity of it. You know, like if you did a level 4 bite to your kid, I mean, that's different. But if you snap at your kid, that's a sign to me, okay, this dog needs more decompression, and then we'll try it again later. A lot of people freak out and they just say, I can't do this thing, and return it. Which is, they should be able to do that. But what I learned as a foster coordinator is really trying to tell people, kind of along the same things Anthony just said, is, don't expect perfection. Don't expect it to act like your last angel dog that never did anything wrong. It's been through a lot. And so just like when we act irritated, angry, and pissed off, and when we're stressed out, dogs can do the same. So yeah, giving them some more time and not writing them off immediately.
Yeah, exactly. Whether it's a potty accident, or chewing up your windowsill, or getting in the garbage, or whatever behaviors. I had a foster this year chew 2 giant holes in the drywall. It's one of those accidents that you recognize, okay, he was really dealing with some serious separation stress. And through working with him and learning how to repair drywall, it ends up being a successful adoption for him.
So you can repair drywall.
Yeah, if you have a dog too, right? But it's one of those situations that can go in 2 directions. I could be upset with him for feeling emotional and having that outlet for himself, or recognize the situation and learn how to set him up for success and also prevent him from doing that again. We'll talk about management tools in a little bit, but that specific situation led me to use X-pins. Is everyone familiar with what an X-pin is? It's like a foldable gate. I wish we would have brought one. I don't think I have it in there. It's like a black metal foldable gate that can either be put in a pin or divide a room or make a horseshoe around an area. If you haven't heard of them, familiarize yourself with them because they are super, super useful. And I probably have double-digit X-pins at my house right now for management. In his case, I just made a perimeter within the room so he didn't have access to the walls anymore to save the walls. It doesn't save the separation stress or anxiety he was feeling, but it puts me in a better state of mind to be able to help him out because I'm not worried about my stuff getting destroyed, right? But yeah, bathroom accidents too. You have to recognize, are they coming from a place with structure and routine, or how is their routine going to change? Routine for fosters or just dogs that are coming into a new environment is super, super helpful because they can start to predict what is going to happen. And for the dogs at my house, like I said, they all live separately, but they all understand what's going to happen. I'm going to let one out and they're going to hear it go out, but they know 10, 20 minutes later, their turn is going to happen. But predictability is super important for a dog, especially in a new environment. So whether that's bathroom trips, feeding schedules, one-on-one time. At my house, given that they're all separate, I call it speed dating in my house. So I'll go and interact with one for a little bit, and then they'll get their meal, and then they'll get some busy work, or just some time to chill, and then I'll go interact with the other one. You know, it's one of those things where the more time you spend with the dogs, the more you learn them in general, and you learn what they like and what they don't like. There's one dog at my house who that's my walking buddy. We'll go walk a couple miles, but that's his enrichment with me. So every situation is going to be different, but the more time you spend with them, the more you're going to recognize what they enjoy, what they don't enjoy particularly, and how to set them up for success. In my situation, there is a big chance that the dogs, if they struggle with separation stress, okay, it's not the best lifestyle for them. So I have to recognize that. And that's, as a trainer and as a problem solver, I will look at that as an opportunity to help them feel, or find out how to help them feel okay with being alone, if that makes sense. You know, and a lot of that is through enrichment. Enrichment is such a key part in any dog's life. If you recognize the opportunities that you may have for enrichment and take advantage of every opportunity, it can change the whole outlook on what does it mean to be alone, or what does it mean to be separate from something else that's happening. Right?
What do you mean by enrichment, like mental stimulation?
So that is the biggest umbrella term that there is enrichment, right? But think about it like this: long leash walks, feeding enrichment, sound enrichment, just being outside, spending time alone, grazing in the grass. What I really try to dial in with new fosters is what are they going to do every single day? They're going to go outside, they're going to eat, they're going to spend time with me. So that's 3 opportunities that I can take full advantage of to enrich their day, or enrich their well-being. Feeding is a big one. Yeah. So
can I interject real quickly?
Yes.
I think of enrichment as like how animals in zoos that are really well funded, they have a environment space that tries to simulate their native environment. So you have a panda bear in a really nice zoo. That enclosure, if it's a really good one, is going to simulate the area where pandas are native from. And it makes the animal's welfare higher because that environment allows the animal to express normal behavior for that species. So if panda bears like wading in the water, you should have a shallow pool. If they like eating bamboo and chewing on it, you should have that. And so we should try and look at dogs that stay in houses as zoo animals. So how do we provide the dog with items, and Anthony's going to go through a bunch, that allow them to express their natural species-specific behavior? Because a lot of people that have dogs as house pets, they try and they expect the dog to be happy with what makes humans happy, like watching TV for 2 hours, binge watching a show, or sleeping for 12 hours, and especially Stacey with puppies knows that that's not what a puppy would choose to do, right? And so if you do not enrich that animal's life in that more human-centric environment, you're probably going to get behavioral problems, especially if you have a dog that is higher drive or higher energy.
So you're talking like retrievers, labs, goldens, like to retrieve, or you're talking German shepherds, working dogs, so.
So that's more of a, I think so. It's more of a basic, just a dog species behavior, more broad, like foraging behavior, chewing behavior, running, yes, chasing things. For pit bull terriers, which is what Anthony and I normally have, it's tugging on a rope swing, retrievers playing, putting something in their mouth kind of thing, So that's my longer explanation of what enrichment means.
Yeah. So like if you think of things that your dog likes to do, take that skill or that game or that activity and then expound upon it. Because enrichment is not limited to anything, really. I mean, you just going and standing outside with your dog and talking to your dog can be considered enrichment if your dog is engaged. But think about it as giving them a more well-rounded life versus just a couch potato.
I'm going to interject again. I can't do as many rotations as Anthony. I just don't have the patience for it or the wherewithal for it. So for Anthony doing all his rotations, and for those of you that have dogs that might not be good with other dogs, you're going to have to rotate them like Anthony does. And so for him, he tries to knock 2 birds out with 1 stone. So he says, okay, Shrimp has to eat breakfast every morning. I also need to enrich her because she's a 2-year-old pit bull that's crazy with energy. So instead of just feeding her out of a bowl, I'm going to use an enrichment toy, which is what these are, that he's about to tell you about. And so it can feel overwhelming if we say, hey, if you're going to foster a dog that can't be with your other dog, you're going to have to add an hour onto your day to enrich it to make it happy. You could, but you also don't have to. Like Anthony and I are trying to make it easier for you guys to foster, and so we're trying to give you tips and tricks that we do to make our life easier when we care for dogs and also keep the dogs happy. I think I have 15 dogs in my house.
Yeah.
So, oh stop! You said it was a face thing. Kelly, she lied. She lied. So yeah. So but my criteria to bring a dog in, a foster dog anyway, is that it has to be dog friendly because they run. Where he has speed dating, I have a house party at my house, and so they enrich each other. If they all couldn't be together, I would not be able to have happy dogs that are 15 and separate from each other. So yeah. Okay.
Right, but that's the idea, is, taking advantage of what your resources are and what you're capable of tolerating, because it can always seem overwhelming, but recognize that learning curve. That adjustment period is something that you guys are going through just as much as the dogs are. If I had a snapshot of my mental state the second day of every foster that I've had, it probably looks the same with me saying, I don't know about this, right? But things get easier as routine starts to implement itself. So Meredith harped on it, where when one dog is outside, that doesn't mean the rest of them are just sitting there staring at the wall. Yeah. There's always activities happening within each room, whether it's feeding enrichment, which I want to go ahead and get into that. Yeah. Does anyone know what this is? Gone wobbler, yes, right? Game changer for me. Game changer for me, right? This is what I feed most of my dogs out of, or something along the lines. This is a horse feeder ball feeder that I got from Tractor Supply, and I just drilled a few extra holes in it, and this is a perfectly fine feeder toy.
Those are, well, to me they're expensive, probably because I have 15 dogs at my house, but I make feeder toys out of PVC pipes. So I get really big PVC pipes with end caps, and I cement it, and then I drill big holes in it, and the dog can roll it around to get that out. I also, this is really cheap, I literally just throw food in the grass and they forage for it. So yeah, but these though are good because they're durable and you can wash them, and they are a little bit more difficult. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's recognizing how to take advantage of what you got, right?
Yeah.
Foraging is a great skill or activity that dogs like to do.
And that is a species-specific behavior of foraging.
Right.
Talking about enrichment, yeah.
How do you get the food in there?
Yeah. So let's go through this, all right? So this is a product you can buy off the shelves, and it can just be used as is, right? Now, recognizing how to make more out of something, I think, is a really important mindset to have when you look at a product like this, product like that, the PVC things she's talking about, creating something. If you can see something and say, all right, we can add to this, do it. As long as your dogs can tolerate it, because what we don't want is a dog to see this and be frustrated, right? Because then that defeats the whole purpose. But this product, what you do is it unscrews right here, and you can just pour the food right here.
And the base in his left hand is weighted with sand, kind of like an old school inflatable punching bag.
So, and then the dogs will just kind of bop it around.
With their nose or their paw.
And food will come out slowly. So it helps for fast eaters.
Yes.
And
which retrievers are known to be.
Yeah. They all are, yes.
And then also, like I mentioned, if you can take a task that they're already going to do, they're going to eat, and now make it exciting, enriching, interactive, take that step.
Yeah.
Because they've done studies with zoo animals where they've given them options. Free food in a bowl versus an interactive toy, and they're going to gravitate towards that because they want to engage with something.
Rebecca, one thing I remember Rebecca Mason, the pet trainer of Locum Training, say is for every 5 minutes your dog does a mental activity like this, it's equivalent to 15 minutes of physical exercise. So it's a 1 to 3 kind of ratio there. And so, yeah, talk about 2 birds, 1 stone, right? You have a 2-year-old crazy golden retriever that's hyperactive, and you feed him out of that, and it takes him 15 minutes instead of the 2 out of the metal bowl.
Right.
And he should be a little bit less intense after that behavior.
Yeah, and just think about it, they're doing something for X amount of time longer, and it's hands-off enrichment for you.
Yeah,
right?
you can be
You can go do something
room,
else.
drinking coffee on the front porch, have a nice break.
Yeah, when before I started fostering, this was like my go-to when I get home from work, feed my dog out of this, and then I can kind of ease back into the home life.
It helped. I don't know if you all have experienced this a lot. I have a lot of mom guilt. So I would feel guilty if I worked for 12 hours a day and came home, and my foster dogs were in their crates, and I just let them out for 15 minutes, go to the bathroom, and touch my hands for another 10 hours. And so having toys like this, where I don't physically have to be there to interact with them, decreases my mom guilt, because I know that they have 20 minutes with that, and that's better than just 15 minutes out in the yard.
And it helps too, if a dog is suffering from some sort of separation stress, it's an independent activity they can do, and it ends in a positive outcome for them, right? But there's layers. I mentioned that if you can make something more so, go with it. So with this right here, you could just pour their food in there and go with it. You could also put a foreign object in here, tennis ball or rubber Kong, some random object, put that in here, and it's going to create less surface area, so they have to work even more to make that same amount of food come out. You can go even further and take all of this and do it outside in the grass. Then you're hitting the foraging lane that she was talking about. So there's always layers to making something more exciting. You could hang this. You could get really creative, right? With making something more exciting and engaging for them. And again, as long as your dog's not frustrated.
I want to interject.
Yes.
I think for me, whenever I present a dog with one of these toys, it's normally because I'm like, that dog is kind of crazy and I'm just gonna need something like this to help me out with it. The dog that is very drivey, normally there's the crazy ones, normally they frustrate easily, and it's through that frustration that they try different behaviors, right? And so I think that experiencing mild frustration, moderate frustration, when you first present this is fine. But if the dog has tried to do this for 20 minutes and the golden retriever is demand barking at the Kong wobbler for it to fall out, that is not helping you. So a little bit of frustration I think is good, because it makes the mind tired, because through frustration you're having to problem solve. And I like exercising crazy dogs' brains like that. So I like to make it a little bit more difficult.
Right. And some, I've showed them how to do it. You can bop it around. You can let them just eat out of it. Like I said, try to just flavor up whatever activity they may be doing. Instead of feeding them out of a bowl, feed them out of a cardboard box, or toss it and let them forage for it.
When I'm really lazy, and I have dogs that don't fight, and I have dogs that don't fight over food, I will watch Celebrity Family Feud for some reason. That's what's on. And I'll have my beer and my wine, and I will literally just throw food on my dining room, living room floor for their dinner, and they forage for it. And I'm okay with it. And it's dry food, of course, and I have hard floors, but they love it. And it takes them 20, 30 minutes, and I can watch TV and absent, I don't even look at them as I throw it.
And when you accidentally spill food,
Yeah.
they don't want that.
Exactly.
And
You have to touch it.
it's
Now
food.
clean up.
Yeah.
You can also,
Yeah.
Question on
Yeah.
that. So I do a lot of pitties also, so I know what you mean. Most of them are very food motivated.
Yeah.
Currently, I have a couple right now that they are. If they're here, if I put them in a crate and they're separated, they don't even care about the food. But if I'm with them, that's a different story. So what you're talking about with this is would they actually care if I wasn't there? So one, we have separation anxiety. Two, if they're not food motivated, what do you mean?
Yeah, so that's a good question. A lot of enrichment toys are geared towards food, which I think is unfortunate, but I think the reason why is because it's easier for a human to give food to a motivated dog, and most dogs are food motivated. But there are other types of enrichment opportunities for them. if there was a dog that you said that they'll only eat if you're there with them or if you touch it?
Yeah, that's less of a situation of, they are, well, yes, they want me there.
Yeah.
And they're super happy and they wanna eat, but if
Yeah.
I were to just like throw them in the crate and leave with their food, they're not gonna touch it. But if
Yeah.
I'm there and the other dogs are there, you know, so they can
Do
see.
they have separation anxiety
I
from
have a
you?
personal dog that does that, and he's a
Mine
puppy,
too.
and he
She'll
won't.
wait till the end of
And
the
they'll
day.
eat till the minute I come home, they'll be so excited they'll start.
I always heard that was like
Yeah.
from when they're so scared that they're not gonna get their next meal, so they wait for you to get home and they eat it.
So there's a lot of interpretation of that behavior, I think, and I don't think anyone is specifically right or wrong. But what I look at that situation specifically is I would look at it as an opportunity to help this dog build confidence without your presence there. So finding out what this dog is willing to eat when you're not there. Maybe it's a couple pieces of chicken, toss it in there, see if it disappears, and then
My
we can really
dogs,
build upon that.
unfortunately, that's our biggest expenses. I mean, food, like everybody has wet food mixed in,
Yeah.
table scraps, chicken, like, you know, stuff. So it's
So
not
it's-
really a situation of finding what they like as far as piggy. It's more of a,
I would wonder the
You know,
distance
stimulation.
away from you that they can be.
Yeah, that's
well,
your
so
opportunity.
well, that's another question. I'm ADD, so, you know, it's a different topic, but I've been holding it since you were talking about having all of your animals separated. I also have, you know, me personally situations, but it's very similar to some of our other fosters. One of our dogs, Captain, he cannot be alone. He will destroy a crate, he will destroy a wall, he'll do anything. But if I leave him with one other dog, and he's not dog aggressive at all, if there's anything else there, the most perfect dog in the entire world.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
I mean, he
fortunate.
would not do anything. So do you don't ever run into that when you're like keeping everybody separate? Is there not a situation that you
I mean,
say, I know for a fact for him, he has to be adopted with another
yeah, no,
you know,
not necessarily. I mean,
animal?
I guess I've just kind of not encountered that specific dog yet. Also, if that was a dog, you know, that needed to be with another dog,
Is be at my house.
it's going her way.
I have experienced,
Yeah.
I have experienced that.
In reality, yeah. You know, because I mean, that's the different resources that we have, you know.
Yeah.
But I look at other things too to help build independent
Yeah.
outings. You know, busy work is a great term. I use it all the time. But I look at Kongs, you know, frozen filled Kongs with something high value for them, bully sticks, antlers, high value treats, frozen things to help them start to build confidence being on their own. And every time I give them something, it's an experiment. If they don't eat it, if they don't engage with it, if they destroy it, if they swallow half of the Kong, now I'm learning, all right, this dog only gets filled bones, or this dog can tolerate Kongs. So it's a constant, you know, trial and error thing. But once I find something that they can go down, or they can, you know, tolerate, then we're gonna build on that. Because everyone is different. Every one of them is different.
Once upon a time, Shelby Humane had a pretty bitchin' enrichment program, in my opinion. And I made a bunch of different enrichment things. 80% of them were food activities, but some of them were not. And so I wanted to try and talk about non-food related enrichment for those that don't have a lot of food drive or are overweight. So there's smells. So you can buy, normally from like a hunting kind of company, different kinds of like musk scents, like rabbit, deer, duck, pheasant. They do smell bad. So I do not recommend that you do
Maybe
it
not worse than the normal in the house.
yeah, unless you're into that smell too. But I get a big like Rubbermaid container that has a lid, and I save a bunch of empty toilet paper tubes, and I sometimes if I had extra like scrap paper, I'd stuff some paper in there too. And I would I would put a couple drops of the scent in that big box, and I'd shake it up, and I would put it in the dog's kennels. If I haven't done this with my dogs at my house, but if I did, you could put those scents outside. It could just be smeared on a tree or on a bush, and you could have the dog smell those things. There's also like different textures. So there's slick toys, metal cans that, well, not metal cans, but like some something made out of metal that they can touch with their paws. Wood decking is something else. I make platforms for them. You can do agility work with them, nose work with them, all the dog sports period with them. That's more of a, you're going into like crazy dog lady when you go into dog sports. But you can do that too. Those are all non-food motivated, non-food centric activities. Also sounds.
Yeah, sounds.
There's so many apps now for dogs where you can make like cat sounds, animal sounds, squeaker toy sounds, stuff like that. Sometimes that can be triggering for dogs though, so like make sure that it's not scaring your dog or making them super aroused and igniting any kind of like insane predatory behavior in them. But we also played like through a dog's ear music at the shelter. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. Long line walks where you walk dogs on longer leashes and let them smell things is also really enriching. If it's a dog that is environmentally sound and confident, taking the dog to PetSmart, and instead of you saying, hey, we're gonna get dog food and that's it, so we're just gonna go to the dog food aisle, like let your dog shop. Like if they wanna smell the rawhide bags for 2 minutes, let them do it. They want to pick out a squeaky toy, let them do it. Those are other things that I do to tire my dogs out. There's also sand pits, ball pits. Some of my dogs, a lot of the pit bull terriers and the prey drive, they like to chase water hoses. There's lots of stuff to do. Flirt poles are really good too. Retrievers playing fetch. I'm lazy, so I like to just stand still.
Have you seen those programmable things that they touch that you can program with a word or whatever?
That was
you can program those with sounds, you can program those with words.
Yes, that's good. That's a nice one too. Yeah, I didn't think about that one. Yeah, there's lots of things. Yeah, so there's, I think a lot of people look at enrichment as them having to go on chewy.com and spend $30 on a snuffle mat, and that's not the case. Dogs are meant to be outside in the wild nature, so sometimes just literally putting them in nature and letting them just do what they would normally do is enriching. So try not to overthink that one.
Yeah. So one thing I want to get to with having the multiple dogs is how to manage them, okay? Because like I said, with the more dogs you have, the more variables for potential accidents you could have. So the way that I keep them contained and have a good peace of mind that even if an accident happens, I still feel good that there's some level of security there, is having layers of management. So right now at my house there's a dog in my room, that's my dog. One in each guest room, there's 2 guest rooms, one in the back.
Are they kenneled in those rooms or are
So-
they used in those rooms?
Okay, so alright, I'll give you the layers. Alright, I was going to give you the big picture, but I'll go ahead and give you the layers that are within the rooms, okay? So the dog that's in my room, she's in the room, and there's a X pin that's broken off into 2 pieces on the inside of the door and on the outside of the door. So there's 3 barriers to where she's at.
Interior X-pin, wooden door to his room,
And then on the
exterior.
outside. Yeah, so I've taken an X-pin, which is like, let's just say 10 panels, and just broken them into 2 panels so I can put them on the insides and outsides of the doors.
And if you guys don't know what X-pins look like, I recommend that you look them up on your phone.
Yeah, we've been trying to get y'all's emails after to send some resources out. But that will also save your door, potentially, if you have a dog that likes to scratch and claw at the door. Having one on the inside can be helpful. Plus, it gives you a buffer to go in if your dog practices jumping on you. So there's another good opportunity for them to do training within it too.
How tall are these?
So they have different heights. The ones in the rooms are not that tall. It just keeps them away from the door, but that's also because they don't try to jump them. If I did have a dog that tried to jump it, then I would adjust.
Why not crate?
So we're getting there.
Okay.
They don't need crates. That one doesn't need a crate because she's in the room. That's the home girl. She's good. But then guest room. They have X-pin perimeters within the room, and then also the gate system. There are the X-pins on each side of the door.
But
So-
no crate.
Right, no crate for them. But keep in mind the layers, right? Having multiple layers it should give you a bit better peace of mind to know if one fails, you got backups.
That is one of the golden rules of management that comes up a lot in different presentations that we see. And it's that management always fails because of human error. So inevitably one day he's going to accidentally leave his bedroom door open. And if he did that, there would be a higher chance of one of the dogs getting out and then getting into a fight. So instead of just relying on the door, he's got interior, extended, and exterior. He's got 3 layers.
Right.
Because he's a little anxious, like I am.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you see dog fights, it really makes you anxious. So yeah, you guys gotta have layers.
Yeah.
And they're not in crates. It's not that we're against crates, as you'll find out in a little bit. It's just that they don't need it. The dogs, because they're more mature and house trained, and they're fine without it.
Yeah. So those dogs all have rooms to themselves, and that's because I live alone and have 2 empty guest bedrooms I can utilize for that. It didn't start that way, but it's just kind of built itself into that, which works for us. Now, I have another one in the bathroom, who he just started going in the bathroom the other day, and reason why he's in there is because another dog came back. Y'all may know that story if you've experienced it. A former foster dog comes back, he's going into the suite because he's had it rough. But the guy in the bathroom, he's only been in there for 3 days. And when he went from a guest room now to this new space, so what I did with that was I introduced him to that new space without knowing I don't have to keep him there. So I had like 2 or 3 days of buffer time to get him used to this space. So what I did was created the environment. He has an X-Pen perimeter and gates, and created an environment for him with a box fan, with a radio, with a lamp, to try to simulate the other environment as best I could, just smaller. And then I started feeding him in that area too. So he doesn't have to stay overnight in that area for the first 2 days, but he does have this positive experience with it, eating in there, and he also willingly went in there each time. Dogs having the freedom of choice to do something, especially if they struggle with containment, which this guy struggles big time with going into the space. If it's their choice to go in there and it delivers in a positive way, that is huge for their adjustment to what the space means. Because if I just throw him in there and say, all right, you're in the bathroom now, he's going to try to bust out, right? Or he's going to experience extra stress that's not necessary. So kind of warming a dog up to a new space is super important. Now this is a unique situation because of the incoming dog, right? But recognizing what's to come and then preparing for it helps him out big time. And he's snoozing in there now. But so that's another one in a bathroom within a perimeter of an X-Pen, and then double gates too. But environment is so huge. Atmosphere of a space is so huge. What does it mean? Are they just in there with the lights off or with the lights on and no sound, no extra stimulation? No, all the dogs in my house have some sort of sound, clock, radio. Thrift stores are great. If you haven't been to a thrift store in a while, go there tomorrow. You can get clock radios for like $2. You can get fans for super cheap. You can get lamps for super cheap. You can probably find baby gates or some sort of other management tools or kids' toys that you can drill holes in and make feeders out of. We've all done that. So you can find a lot of stuff for super cheap. Don't think you need to go spend a lot of money. But so that's my upstairs dogs. Downstairs is where the crates are. I have 2 dogs in my basement that are in crates near each other. And these are the 2 most high-strung of the dogs in my house who live next to each other. But they're not competing for space, and they're not even actively sharing space. The way I have them.
Why did you select them to go in the crates?
So one of them, well, both of them, I would say, struggle with bathroom routines. Zoe, one of them, she spent the past 2 years in shelter care, in different shelters. And she's not one that everyone could take out. So she struggled a lot with just when and where do I go to the bathroom. So I had her in a bigger space, and she was going consistently in that space. Now that she's in a crate, and she likes that kind of enclosed space, it's eliminated the bathroom accidents. Yeah, but then also these 2, I mean, they need to be contained in a sense. because more space, more room for potential destruction too. But having them in their crates is super helpful for them and for me. But their crates are covered. One of them has like an actual crate cover that's kind of tighter. The other one I've kind of rigged up just visual barriers for them. And that's been very helpful for them because dogs coming from shelter world struggle with things going past them often. And those two specifically. But so they're in crates. They each have a layer around their crate too. They each have a pin around their crate. And then the third layer is a border X-pin. So when dogs walk past them, because everyone has to go downstairs past those two dogs to go outside, that's my third layer of security so that they can't clash.
And I will note, all these dogs came from Shelby Humane. They were on the euthanasia list because they were so crazy in kennel. And even though Anthony keeps them in solitary, for how many hours a day would you say that they're by themselves?
Probably 8, give or take, you know.
I would say more than that. They're
Well,
still,
I guess, yeah. I mean, I guess if I'm not there.
they're still drastically happier than they were in the shelter, and their quality of life is a lot higher. Like, they gain weight, their coat looks good, they're being social now, they're not being fear aggressive, blah, blah, reactive. And so I think a lot of people, even Bill, the director of Shelby, and the one before that was like, well, I can't take this dog home because it's dog aggressive and I have a dog, and I would just keep it in a crate in my basement. I'm like, okay, that's better than being here.
Yeah.
Like, it's
recognizing the difference in just environment.
For most dogs, it's better than being there. And so I think a lot of people have this stigma where if a dog has to stay in a crate and be rotated, that it's not good. For some it is. But for most, I think it's better than whatever terrible situation they were from before.
I can imagine all those energies they're picking up on there, all that fear and the trauma.
Yeah, just the apps. It's almost like I think you all have heard of that 2-week decompression period that's really popular. And that's where you take a dog that's been overwhelmed by stimulus, right? Being at a shelter so loud. Or being in a house with 5 toddlers that are trying to poke their fingers up his nose all the time. And the dog literally just needs quiet, absence of stimulus. It needs to go on a vacation, spa, relaxation retreat. And a lot of them, he has so many pictures and videos, like just on the ride home from the shelter, the dog sleeps because they're just so exhausted and they're like, thank God, like there's not stimulus.
Yeah, you can visibly see them finally relax.
I don't know if you guys have run into that in rescue when you recruit fosters, like at special events, people are like, oh, I work too much. And you're like, still, it's better than being at a shelter, you know? So that's been a hard point for me to try and push through to people.
Right.
It's definitely what we say. I mean, we have some recent situations, and one's been in board and train forever, but she's been in like an outside area, and the guy's like, he works 12 hours a day, and we're like, you know what? Exactly. He's gone 14 hours, like, you know what? She's inside, she's happy, she is, you know, even in a crate, she is so much happier
than where she was.
And that's one of the things, like, I know you guys do it with recruiting fosters, there's not a one size fits all. It's like, we can find, no matter what you do, like, we can find a dog that will fit your needs and
that's
be
good.
happier. And it has nothing to do with
that.
Yeah, and if their well-being is a concern, I would recommend putting a camera on them and watch them. Let their behavior display what we think may be happening. Because then if you have a dog that's actively trying to bust out of the crate's probably not a great option for that dog, but then you adjust if it's possible.
Yeah.
But then if you see a dog who's relaxing in their crate for 10 hours a day plus, and then when you see them, they're fine, like at least their well-being seems all right, then that may help you feel better making that decision.
Less mom guilt.
Yeah, and you know, I will say this too, one of the dogs that recently got put in the crate downstairs because another dog left, that was another reason. She is going to have upcoming heartworm treatment happening, and this one is a bang, 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 bang dog, so like making her world smaller, more relaxed for her, more contained, is something that we're moving forward towards, which is her treatment. So that's where we're kind of going with that.
You mind if we segue fit into multiple dog
Yes.
households?
Real quick, she asked about keeping them cool. They all have a fan on them, and then they have access to water. My basement there's air conditioning down there too. Yeah, they all have air conditioning. If it ever was a concern, then that's like a major priority is to help them stay cool. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I was like, because I'm thinking about my garage and I'm thinking, oh God, I can never put a dog out there. But,
Yeah, well, you know,
But they're
and
different
trial
situations.
it beforehand and see. You know, put a thermostat in there.
Well, I have a window unit
Yeah, that's
in
what I
my
have in my
half-finished
garage too.
basement.
And blackout curtains everywhere. Keep it dark and cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me see if there's anything else on the list. Yeah, just real quick. Baby gates, X pins, crates. These are all things familiarize yourself with because they are game changers and lifesavers.
They are.
And you will talk about having preventatives too. Ear hormones, break 60.
Oh, okay. So, raise your hand if when you foster a dog, does that mean that you'll have more than one dog in the house? So, like, if you were to foster a dog, yeah. So that's a struggle, I think, with rescue because, like, whenever I try, whenever someone calls me or Shelby's like, hey, this dog in rescue, I'm like, well, is it dog friendly? No. It's like, good luck. Because most people that are in rescue that foster, they like dogs, and so they have a dog, right? And so if they're not willing to do what Anthony does, it can become an issue. So that's normally when people ask me to do dog-on-dog assessments, right? And so when I consult with Shelby, one of the services that I offer is a really thorough dog-on-dog test. And I have, the reason why, I'm going to sound terrible, but I promise I love dogs. But the reason why I have feral dogs is because normally they're scared of people, but they're great with other dogs, okay? Because they live in a pack, so they know how to talk to the dog. And I also like them because they don't really want to go on walks because they don't really like leashes, and so they're happy just being in my fenced-in backyard and eating and playing with dogs. So, yeah, they're not very needy. I could not have 15 dogs in my house that all want my attention. They would drive me insane. So I would bring the aggressive dogs in, like all the ones that he has in his house, to my house to do dog-on-dog evals. And the way that I try and do this first is try to collect as much behavioral history as you can. So, like, if you guys get a dog to introduce to your current dog, one of the first questions that I would want to know is, well, has this dog I'm taking in been around other dogs? If the answer is no, there's not much you can do, and oftentimes the answer is no because the dog came in as a stray, blah, 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 right? And also shelters suck at taking behavioral history at intake, even though there's a whole form that Shelby can make out, but we still don't do it. Anyway, so, yeah, and so if the answer is yes, then my next question is, well, what did the dog live with other dogs? Did it go to dog parks? Okay, yes. All right, well, if it lived with other dogs, what kinds of dogs were there? Was it a bigger dog, a small dog, male dog, female, low energy, high energy, yada, yada, yada. And they tell me, and I say, okay, well, has the dog ever taken a correction from another dog? And people are like, what does that mean? Well, how did your dog react if another dog growled or snapped at it, right? And if that answer to that question is going to be the answer that really tells me if this is going to be a dog that's easier to integrate with other dogs or more difficult. Because if the dog gets snapped at and retaliates that correction, so throws gasoline on that fire, if you will, does not solve conflict through avoidance, but instead with aggression, that's a dog that has more, I would say, emotional special needs, that's going to need a really slower intro, or maybe be one that is more dog selective, okay? The one that does take a correction, I'm like, yes, it's going to be pretty easy. This is the kind of dog that could probably run in a pack of dogs because it knows how to diffuse conflict, okay? So if the answer was that the dog bows up at conflict, the next question I have is, okay, how far did that dog go? Did a dog fight happen? Yes. Okay, how did you separate the dog fight? Could you yell at them and separate them? Did they separate on themselves after 3 seconds? And then the other question, if the answer to those questions is no, we have to physically pull them off each other, that is a huge red flag for me. And then the other question is, how much damage was inflicted? Oh, just a scratch on the ear, or it needed to go to the emergency vet and get 7 stitches and a drainage tube. All right, that is intense, right? And so okay? Yes.
Quick question while you're talking about
Yeah.
the two dogs like that just go at it and they're
Yeah.
just not getting up. What if you get attacked?
That is-
Speaking from
that is-
experience, and you get totally attacked trying to break them up and they're still not
I mean, that's even more of a red flag.
flag.
Yeah, that's even more of a red flag. Most of the time, I have so many dog bite wounds on my body, and I would say 80% of them have been redirected bites, separating dog bites.
What was your way of breaking them up?
Oh. So I've been dealing with dogs for 10 years, I'm 30 years old now. And when I first started, my MO was to just dive over top of the dog that was on bottom. And so that's how I would get bit, right?
Yeah.
But it stopped it. And then as I got older and more experienced, this is gonna sound terrible, but I watched so many dog fights happen between dogs that were similar size. I started to see that the dogs could actually take more damage than I thought that they could. And that gave me more confidence to take a moment and be more logical and less emotional about my reaction and take the time to turn around and go get the air horn or go get the water hose or blah, blah, blah. And you know, if you have a toy poodle matched with an 80-pound pit bull,
You can't
You-
have time.
there's not, that's another thing that I'm glad I brought up. Whenever there's two dogs that are meeting each other, size is another thing. So if that 80-pound pit bull came from a house that had 3 smaller dogs in it and there was no issue, I feel a little better. If that dog has not though, and also shows prey drive, like towards cats or squirrels or something, that's another red flag for me with small dogs, because a fight between an 80-pound versus 10-pound dog, the 80-pound dog can just pick it up and shake it and break its neck, right? Whereas if it was matched with a 60-pound dog, it would bite and probably shake the skin, but it's not going to cause a neck break normally, right? And so it sounds bad, but I had so much experience with dog fights that I learned that I could take the time to be more responsible and safe about how I split up the fights. For dogs that latch on and don't let go, I have found the worst thing to do is to physically hold them and pull them off, because you'll get big tears on the skin instead of just a puncture. And so instead what I try and do, like the last time I got bit by a dog was a 90-pound German Shepherd. It wasn't a dog bite, or a dog fight bite. And he could jump, I'm only 5'2", so he could jump up and I'm like, please don't bite my face. Like, you can bite my arm, you can bite my leg, but don't bite my face. And so I pinned him up against the wall by his collar and fed him my forearm. So he bit my forearm instead of my face, and so it's immobilizing. So you pin 2 dogs that are fighting on the ground, you push them on the ground like this and try and keep them still. That's what I've done. And then eventually, it feels like forever, but eventually they'll loosen up their bite to readjust normally, and it's at that moment where you try and split them apart. And I still fall victim to having the impulse to put my hands on dogs before I use an air horn or a water hose, especially if it's far away. So when I do put my hands on dogs, that's what I can do. Also, all the dogs that are in my house that play together, they have collars on, so that I do have something to grab on in case a fight does happen. Those are the dogs that I'm like, I don't know if you're okay yet. The ones that are like, okay, they don't have collars on, because sometimes it cannot be safe for dogs to wrestle with collars on. But yeah, so the biggest thing that I have found that separates, that I rely on a lot, is an air horn, because it's really loud. For dogs that are like in the throes of it though, it doesn't matter, the sound. The other thing I've used is water. If I remember when I was like 23, I used a Swiffer sweeper rod. I just banged it on the ground to get him to stop.
What about pepper spray?
You could do pepper spray too. It's just there's a high chance of, in the throes of it, you spray yourself accidentally.
That's what you want to keep in mind.
Or the blowback of it. And when you use things that cause pain, and you know the air horn and the water hose could do this too, you run the risk of making the dog more pissed off and then redirecting on you. There's
too kitchen pots in there, just because it startles them and distracts them.
Yeah, one of the leading people in dog aggression is Michael Shapaccio. I thought he was freaking crazy because I watched a seminar and he said use an umbrella. I'm like, do you carry around an umbrella whenever you walk your dog? And he's like, if a stray dog runs up and he's trying to go at your dog, open the umbrella to scare him or use a visual blocker. And I'm like, in my mind, dog's gonna push through an umbrella. But I guess sometimes it works, sometimes. So yeah, there's lots of different things that I've used. If a dog does not separate with me vocalizing, air horning, dog is not going to be allowed to interact the same way that I formally trusted him or her to, because that's a very dangerous situation. Yeah.
On the intro side.
Yeah.
You're taking precautionary.
Yes. So I have a lot of dogs at my house, as you all know, and that allows me to have a true rainbow of personalities. For those of you that have multiple dogs, you probably can pick one that you know is going to be the most friendly to introduce first, like your guinea pig dog. That dog should probably be lower energy, and if it gets snapped at, should not retaliate. That correction, it should defer in conflict, right? And then if the dog is good with that, I go up from there to a more normal dog that might breed a little bit more forwardly, might have more energy, might be a little bit more rude in play. And if that new dog I'm introing can handle that well, then I go to the next tier, which might be a dog that has more special needs. Like my cattle dog Lennox, she's like a policewoman, and if you piss her off, she will snap at you. And so that would be like the highest tier of personality dog that I intro to a new dog. If they can pass Lennox's test and handle that more spicy personality, then that dog is really good, in my opinion. And a lot of people would especially the people, she's my foster fail, they would probably tell me Lennox should never be with another dog because of that aggression. But her aggression, her bite threshold is very healthy. She never goes to puncture another dog. After she snaps at another dog, she stops because the aggression yielded the result that she wanted, which is the puppy to stop incessantly licking her face like a little gnat, right? And it's all very appropriate in my opinion. So I let her do that. And she's the one that lets me know, okay, this new dog can take a correction, right? This new dog can be humped. This new dog can, I don't know, be like handle some stress. You know what I mean? And after this, I hope that I can share with you some of those dog-on-dog tests that I did for Shelby Humane, because you'll see me go through each dog's personality as I assess the dogs. Yeah, that's all I can think to say about that. Does anybody have any particular questions about dog-on-dog intros?
I do.
Okay.
Well, for a dog who doesn't react to anything, like my dog will let another dog sit on its head. Like,
I remember with your
he won't
intro.
set boundaries, so that's my problem.
So you're going to have to be the one that sets boundaries for him then. You're going to have to help him out. In my opinion, it benefits a new dog, especially an adolescent dog, to have another dog administer corrections, to let them know, hey, you're being freaking rude right now. Not every dog is going to let you sit on its head. You know what I mean? And so when I hate when one of my dogs, Elsie, who's kind of like your dog, lets any dog just hump her. She just stands there and looks at me, and I'm just like,
do something.
I'm like, come on, girl, it's 2022. Get this guy off of you. And so that's when I'll come in and tell the dog to come here and get off of her right now, and I will step into him to use my body pressure to get him off. And it's something that even though this is a good point. Even though we're not worried about your dog getting into a fight with this other dog and vice versa, what is that new dog learning when they're unsupervised together? That new dog loves sitting on your dog's head for some reason. And so if you're not there to interrupt that learning from occurring, he's going to keep doing it. And so you need to be there to kind of structure more of that social interaction. And there's a bunch of different things that you can do to help that. You can firm up a recall with that new dog and call him away when he goes to sit on the head. You can do a mat settle to get him to chill out. I will admit it is more of a headache to have a dog where you need to mom for him and like correct the other dog for him, because I would not want to leave them unsupervised together, because I would want the new dog to practice that behavior. And if he ever needs to meet Lennox to correct him, Lennox would love to do that for him.
But that's a good point, you know, as far as like using the resources, you know, so like if there's a dog within your community that you know
I
is
was
good.
thinking that. Your dog sounds like the perfect dog to help some of these other people.
He's a great dog to test because like no reaction.
He's like a therapist for dogs, you know what I mean? Like
He's
like,
Switzerland.
yeah,
He has no views about
he's like, you
anything.
can feel safe with me, I'm never gonna answer back conflict, you're okay. That's my dog Elsie that gets humped and stares at me. So yeah, that's a really good question. It's a more abnormal situation that you have.
But it does bring up the thought of you have to recognize that there's individuals here communicating. There's your dog and then another dog, or your personal dog, or whoever's already living with you, and then this next dog that you bring in. So taking in history from both dogs is super important. And if there's ever a question, take those preventative measures. You know, basket muzzling, on leash, supervision, teamwork, having another person there can be really helpful.
Yeah, I just thought of something else to say, but before I forget, what was your question?
Okay, so whenever I get a new foster, I have 2 small dogs at home already, and I'm in a small apartment by myself.
Okay.
So it's not like I have someone who can bring them outside and they can meet, you know, neutral ground. So here's what I do, and you can tell me if this is good or not.
Okay.
So I put mine in a crate, and I bring the new dog in and let them explore the apartment right quick.
Okay.
With the leash still on.
Okay.
Once that's kind of settled and, you know, calm, then I let calm dog out, the one that is the least reactive. And they mate for a second. And then after that meeting, I put her up and then I pull out the more hyper dog.
Okay.
And then they meet.
Okay.
And then after that, I let them both out. You know, and I let them play for a little bit. And then like for the first day or two, depending on the dog, I'll just rotate in the crates and stuff, and just like I'm just telling them this is my pack and this is da 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 da, you know, and I'm just kind of walking them through it for a couple of days, and then after that, you know, it kind of evolves by itself.
Things that I like about that is your slower pace with it, the 2 or 3 days, and I like how you're introducing just one dog at a time so as not to overwhelm the new dog. Things that I think could go wrong, depending on the temperament of your dogs and the one that's coming in, is some barrier frustration. His 2 dogs, oh my god. If they were met a dog in a crate, it would go worse than if they weren't, because they're so frustrated they can't get to that other dog. Once you let them out, all of that emotional energy is going to cause lots of bad social decisions probably. So it depends. There's a bunch of people here right now that if you called up and wanted to walk the dogs outside together, would probably do that with you at your apartment complex. Walking dogs together is one of my favorite ways to introduce them, and I like to do a parallel leash walk, which means still one dog of yours is on one side of the street, and your dog is on the other, and you gradually get closer. Going on walks helps because it's kind of like an icebreaker, so believe it or not, I used to have a lot of social anxiety. And I remember being a freshman in college, my RA would knock on my door and be like, Meredith, come out to this icebreaker. I'm like, no, I'm terrified. I don't want to go. But if I were walking into the recreational room and there were people playing a video game, and then they were like, do you want to play with me? I'd be like, yeah, because I feel better that I'm focusing on a video game and they are too, and we're not each other's sole focus. And that's what walks do. They're like icebreakers. And that's really something that's needed for dogs that might be reactive or have issues meeting new dogs. They need that walk to kind of come off of that initial, oh my god, it's a new dog kind of thing. But yeah, it sounds like you're doing what you can. If I were you though, I'd want a second person to do a leash walk. I would try and invest the time and energy in scheduling that to make that happen.
Yeah, I really like the concept of dogs learning to share space without competing for space.
Right.
So that's where
Yeah.
the parallel leash walk is great. And also familiarizing yourself with dog body language. That is like above all. I mean, like understanding an accurate interpretation of what you're seeing is super helpful. Right.
Okay, so some of you, I think when you introduced yourself, said that you had resident dogs that had reactivity issues, right? Yeah. So you've probably definitely seen Anthony's lifelike fake dog. I have one too. So whenever, like, I have a 100-pound Great Dane and a 50-pound Shepherd and an 80-pound Pit Bull that I'm doing board train with. Everyone but the Pit Bull has fear aggression towards dogs and people. So whenever they're out on a walk with their owners, they would lunge and bark at people and other dogs, right? So they're automatically written off as being dog aggressive. And so when I see a dog like that, I don't say, yeah, definitely dog aggressive, can never live with another dog. The first thing that I do is say, well, what happens if given another dog and it has access to it without it being on that leash, talking about barrier frustration. And I use a lifelike fake dog, and it really looks real, like to the point where like mine in the bed of my pickup truck right now, people probably think I'm running around with like a dead dog in the back of my truck, as bad as that sounds. Especially since I have my business logo for love of dog, and then it looks like it's dead dog in my truck. But it's stiff and everything too. So dogs think it's real. And so you start to see. And I start all dog-on-dog assessments with dogs that have a history, like red flag history. I've seen probably 5% of those dog-aggressive dogs practice predatory aggression, which means they zone in, squeal, run, bite, kill, bite, shake, okay? 95% of the dogs that have dog-on-dog issues, they run up to it, they bark at it, they circle around it because they're scared. They don't trust it, right? And so, those are the kinds of dogs that benefit a lot from the parallel leash walk, all right? When I see that fear-based behavior in a dog, I feel better about introducing them to my neutral dog, like your retriever that you have at home, right? And then I start to see, well, how long does it take for this dog to feel comfortable? And comfortableness to me is social behavior. So are you tucking your tail and hiding in a corner, avoiding the whole time? Or are you actually going to smell this other dog's butt? That's good. Even better, are you play bowing? I'm like, this dog's about to play bow. And yes, it does. And when the play bow's there, then I like to see play styles. So the fake dog really helps me, and there's some contention about the validity of using a fake dog for a dog-on-dog assessment in the dog training community. I have found that it gives me a lot more information. And it's true, sometimes the dogs treat the fake dog differently than a real dog, but more often times than not, it really shows me the root of the issue in the dog. Yeah. Sorry, any other questions?
Can you get into, that's a great segue to go into what to do with the dog that is, like the foster that I have now, he's fine with other dogs once he meets them, but when we're on the leash, it's a fear-based reaction.
So it can be, it can also be frustration related. So dogs, just like people, so we can probably ask ourselves this question and answer it in our own heads. When you are met with conflict, what do you do from a human? I avoid conflict. So if someone came up and yelled at me right now, I would probably walk to the corner and turn my back. Anthony is also more avoidant, but he's a little bit more confident than me, so he might bow up and be like, hey, stop talking to me like that, right? And be a little bit more aggressive. So for dogs that are on, if I was on a leash right now, and she was coming at me aggressively, I wouldn't be able to choose avoidance to feel safe, right? And so I'm still faced with this conflict, this fear. I can choose avoidance, well I can't choose avoidance because I'm on a leash. I could be learned helpless, which means I just go catatonic and pee myself and put myself scared. Or I can become aggressive to try and get the threat to go away. And unfortunately for dogs that have the leash reactivity, every time they bark at a person or another dog that's walking down the street, that person goes away. Not because they're afraid of your little dog barking at them, but because that's just where they were going. And so the dog's like, okay, that worked, so I'm going to keep practicing it every time. Do you see what I'm saying? And so it can become so ingrained, and it can become such a habit to do that, that even when they're not on a leash, they don't choose avoidance anymore like they might have. You normally see fear-based aggression and reactivity in dogs. I tend to see it after 1.5 years or 2 years. And I ask them, what was your dog's behavior like prior? Like 6 months and younger? Oh, skittish is everything. Fear-based behavior. Oh, it ran away from people. And people went to go and hug it still when it was in the... So that dog learned that avoidance doesn't work. Well, the moment it snapped at the 6-year-old kid that came over for Christmas, that kid cried and went away, so that dog learned that aggression worked because it was disrespected by choosing avoidance. The other thing is the frustration-related aggression on leash. So they want to get to that other dog to say hi, but they can't because they're attached on a leash. This happens so much in kennel settings, shelters, dog daycares, boarding facilities. They want to go and see that other dog in person and they can't, so they get frustrated, just like we get frustrated and we go, table flip, right? And so, just like with the fear aggression, that can become such a regular occurrence that they just assume, okay, there's another dog there, let me immediately table flip. Even though they didn't need to have experienced frustration for 10 seconds, it just now automatically happens. And so that is leash reactivity is very common. For both, for frustrated leash reactive dogs, normally they're okay in a loose, where they're not on a leash, right? If they're fear reactive, normally you still see that fear when they're off leash greeting another dog. So those are ones that'll like tail tuck and look up nervously, lick, and then snap and try and cower away, right? That fear is still there, and that not knowing how to interact socially is still there, but it's less explosive because they're not on a leash. Does that make sense?
Okay. And I have a doctor who recently adopted one that's just seems to love every dog, and from what you're describing, it's the frustration thing she's experiencing because she wants to go.
Yeah, but she's also, and I'm not positive of this, but she's in that teenager stage. She's only like 6 or 7 months old.
Oh, no, she's 3 years.
Yeah, the one you have her.
Strawberry.
Oh.
The one that was adopted.
You're talking about strawberry, you're not talking about your current ones.
No.
Oh.
I mean, the one I have currently, I can't decide if it's, I think it's probably fear-based for him, but for Strawberry, she was very friendly. And the lady is now having trouble with her because she's so reactive and she's pulling at her and stuff, and she doesn't know what to do with her.
Sometimes too, other dogs can teach other dogs to be reactive. I don't know if Strawberry lives with somebody else now.
She's a little scruffy dog that came from a
Yeah.
pretty much boarding type situation. So I think what she's probably doing is, professional, is she is becoming comfortable in her environment, and she is like, oh, I'm with these people now.
Yes,
This is my
so
people,
that's,
and I'm
sorry,
going to
Amy,
work.
that's a good point. A lot, I think being aggressive, just like me. So if I was in the corner and she kept coming at me and I was avoided, I would not choose aggression. I would go into learned helplessness and start cowering. Okay? And so a lot of times, aggressive dogs, I ask their clients, how does the dog react in a vet hospital or a boarding facility where they're really scared? Oh, they just let the vet do anything. Well, are they tail tucked? Do they have? No. They're learned helpless. It takes confidence to be aggressive because aggression is expression, it's communication, right? And so yes, I think that can happen. You can get a dog from a shelter that was quiet and great and really calm and mellow, and 2 weeks later, barking at, well, that's because it became more confident in itself, and so it's using that aggression communication to say, I'm not comfortable, whereas before it's like, oh my God, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bounced around, I now have this family unit, and now
Yeah.
and there's
Right.
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, reactivity is a big rabbit
It's
hole
my
to go down. Yeah,
favorite
and she will
thing.
not stop talking about it. If it gets concerning, reach out to a trainer. You know, or use your resources that you have, whether it's where the dog used to live or someone that you can consult and interact with, because there's so much more surrounding the situation than just what we're observing.
Yeah.
So yeah, reach out to somebody.
If anyone's afraid, like genuinely afraid to have their reactive dog meet another dog, I recommend that you use a fake dog.
Yeah.
That really has made a lot of my clients feel a lot more optimistic and hopeful. I also, if you guys pull dogs from shelters and you don't know behavioral history with other dogs, the fake dog is nice too. So yeah.
on leash walking, a lot of dogs we get are terrible on leash because they've never been on a leash, haven't been trained. Do y'all recommend, even if they're bad on a leash, to walk them? Or, like, because you don't want to, does that reinforce the bad leash walking?
You know, I mean, I think it's something that, you know, well, I'll tell you what, I don't structure leash walk with any of my fosters. One, because I'm lazy and I like using a long line and letting them explore and doing those types of walks. But it's also an experience that the owner can go through with the dog as far as consulting a trainer and working through that structure. So I don't think it's not going to be detrimental to the dog if you don't walk it or if you do walk it.
Well, it's just for my mental sanity. I don't want to be pulled by a sled dog, so that's why I like.
Yeah, I mean, that's where strategy can come into play. You know, like you go to an environment where there's not a lot of activity and you use a 30-foot long line and take your time.
So my 2 cents on that is that the kind of mess, like I like the brains, I like the dogs with brains that are messed up. And so that is not a priority of mine to have good leash manners because they're so timid of people. The fact that they are walking on a leash and even pulling to create pressure is like, oh my God, right? Same for jumping up on a person. For a dog that hates people and jumps up on my friend that comes over, that's huge, right? And then I can refine that into a more socially appropriate dog. But for the ones, if I had normal dogs that were really confident and happy and pulling everywhere, if it's to the point where it is really hurting me every day and it's where you add an adoption in it and say you want to walk him for 5 minutes and they come back and like, oh yeah, he pulls so hard, I don't think I can get. To me, that's when that becomes a priority to help with the leash training. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then also too, if it is like, I mean, I've told clients this before, if walking your dog is the most stressful thing that you do with that dog, let's find another outlet of enrichment, you know, because it's not, I mean, just because a dog doesn't go for a walk, it's not the worst time.
Yeah, I think too, you pick and a lot of people think they can only walk their dog in their neighborhoods, which is really stimulating. There's people, other dogs in backyards. So I like to walk my dogs in on church campuses when it's not Sunday, where it's more quiet, sports complexes. You can, I mean, Angela and I can all tell you ways to help with leash pulling. In my, you know, Angela has experienced different. It's a hard thing for people to work with their dog because it requires lots of diligence.
Yeah.
Well, it's just one thing prospective adopters sometimes
Yeah.
ask about.
It is hard.
Can it walk on a leash?
Yes, it is hard. It is hard, and I don't think there's any easy way for you to take a dog that pulls chronically hard on a leash to an adoption event and tell an adopter or you yourself say, in 5 minutes I can have this dog walk better. You have to do it diligently every time that dog is on the leash, on the collar, the harness that you have.
But I'll say from experience, it's no matter what you do as a foster, that adopter has to be willing to do the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, because if you don't have,
Yeah.
you have that dog that, okay, yeah, she doesn't jump with me, she walks perfectly, she's amazing.
Yeah.
Angela, they're all amazing with Angela.
Right.
I'm like, come on,
Yeah.
that's like perfect dog. And they get with me, and I'm like, what the heck? You know, I mean, that adopter has to be
That brings up a
willing
really,
to somebody has to be willing.
yeah, that brings up a really good point, which is how to translate your experience with this dog to the potential adopters.
Right.
So one thing that I've told people to do, create a list of likes, doesn't likes, right? So that way it's as easy of a transition for these people to take in this dog. And maybe that's something you definitely put at the top of the list. Pull super hard on the leash. Reach out for
Yeah,
help.
straight up.
You know? I mean, like, be blunt with good and bad behaviors, so that way you can set this dog up for success in the next place that it's going.
I would also, for my board and train clients, because they spend so much money, I have so much anxiety that when I give the dog back, like you and Angela, so the dog does great for me, I give him back to Stacy, the dog's terrible. And so I video record myself working with the dog. I only need to do that, I don't know, once, and then give that video to them so they can watch the handling. So that might be something that you can do to help adopters and say, hey, this is how I work with this dog I'm pulling because he is really bad on leash. This is a video I can send with all the email automated documents on how to work it.
Or even their routine, you know, like, so, like, my dog's, like I said, very routine oriented, so, like, recognizing this is a day in the life of this dog right now, right? Though the environment's going to be different, as close as they can simulate that, it's going to make it easier for both of them. But I flood people with information. She checked on my dogs when I went out of town. Here's all the things to do with them, right? But it's recognizing how to make that transition as easy as possible for the human who's getting it and for the dog that's going to the new space.
There's also in the dog training community, there's in some of the webinars I've watched, I forget the name of the trainer, but she was like, have the dog walk really well on one type of walking gear. So for me and my dog's is a no-slip collar. Have the dog be able to pull and go buck wild on a harness so that you set up an expectation for the dog to walk well on a collar, but if you're walking into a daycare or a vet clinic where you haven't practiced proofing that good leash walking in that high distraction environment, you're not ruining all the leash work that you did in your neighborhood. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I don't even have time to work my personal 4 dogs on walking well into a vet hospital. Who does that? Nobody does that. So that's when I put them on the harness. And
Well, I just think, perspective of doctors,
Oh,
like, that's
yeah,
an
for
easy one,
sure.
like, hey, if this dog walks well on a
Oh, for
leash,
sure.
I know I can walk it every day in my neighborhood.
Yeah, and there's lots of different methods. You do golden retrievers, and normally they are food whores, right? They love to eat.
Every time.
So if you have a dog that's really drivey and something that you can easily give to them, normally you get more traction in your training faster versus dogs that don't have as good of a toy or a food drive. And like I said, there's a lot of different ways to train dogs. For Angela does it differently than me, than I do it differently than Anthony, but that's a hard one. It's a
But leash walking in general, is one of the most challenging things on a
yeah,
space.
for quick fixes though,
Yeah.
I've used head collars before. Nutrix is one of my favorite companies. The downside of head collars is everybody thinks it's a muzzle. But since you do golden retrievers, you might think it's a circle stock. But prong collars are something that I normally don't do. I know dogs that pull really hard and are crazy. They can really hurt themselves on that. And I like to adhere to LEMA, which is least invasive, minimally intrusive statement. Sometimes though, I will admit that head collars can be more aversive than prong collars.
Is that the one that turns their head when they
It's
pull?
like a horse bridle on a
It
dog's
kind of
face.
goes over their snout.
So him and I co-parented a crazy American Pit Bull Terrier named Mandy who wore a head collar all the time because she pulled so much. And we're, like you said, we have too much going on to really invest every day in training one dog. It's a foster dog, not even ours. So the head collar was a quick fix for us there. There is, in my opinion, there is no such thing as a no-pull walking gear, okay? Before I went into more rewards-based training, I had my dogs in prong collars, and they were so fragile, they fell apart. Like, they hated going on walks. They would redirect on each other because they were in pain so much from them, and I had it well fitted and everything. I've used electronic collars before in my early dog training days, same kind of thing happened. So I try and stay away from that as much as I can. So yeah, and like he said, for me, if my dog is so bad that I'm using an electronic collar on him for leash walking, I think I would just choose to enrich him in different ways or really buckle down and invest in training. But that is a very hard one.
It really is. Any other questions?
Okay, yeah, okay, so I live in a small house, and the thing my backyard is about half of this ring, maybe 3/4 of this ring, actually. Right, this is privacy fenced in, so once I have the dogs and I have somebody, and we've done a leash walk around the block, and they've ignored each other, or they, they did whatever they did for a few minutes, but then as we walk, they ignore each other. At that point, when we go into the house, where do I go from there?
As far as the dogs integrating,
Yes,
Yeah.
should we immediately go to the backyard and leave them on the leash and let them?
so you can be hyper cautious, or you can kind of let them sort of feel it out a little bit. You can have them in muzzles. You can
It depends on the behavioral history of both. So if it's more of a red flag dog, I would be extra cautious. If they're not, I normally introduce dogs in my backyard first after the walk. drag leashes. Because that frustration-related aggression can occur. I don't know if that's something in your...
Yes, and that's kind of exactly what I'm asking.
So letting them drag leashes, as long as they're not afraid of it, is something that I would do. Now, okay, so a lot of people, so say dog A has a tendency to snap at other dogs, right? And dog B, friendly dog, goes to dog parks all the time, 2-year-old, golden retriever, lab mix, loves everybody, stupid, happy dog. Most people in that situation would hold the leash of the dog that was known to snap aggressively, right? Because they're like, oh, I need to control this dog because it's the aggressor. I would actually hold the leash of the crazy 2-year-old dog because the dog that is snapping is normally doing it because it's feeling overwhelmed, okay? So you control that energy ball that's likely to piss the other dog off that has more boundaries, okay? And so that's really important. So I would let the dogs feel each other out. If it's a crazy one and my dog is special needs, I would have the crazy one more on a leash. And then after that dog A corrected that dog B, I would see if that dog B responded well to that correction. Did it back up and then go right back to it? Or did it back up and turn around and sniff and give that dog a break? The latter is more important, is the favorable one, right? And you just keep going through these steps to kind of help those dogs communicate with each other. Just like people. Him and I have great chemistry, right? So we would be the two dogs that would love each other from the first walk, right? There are other people that I know that I don't have great chemistry with, that I would need to do lots of things to make myself trust them and really let my guard down. And dogs are the same, I think. And that is the hard thing to learn. When you go to the next step, when you don't, and that's where body language knowledge is really important.
So when you see one of the two or both starting to get a little nervous, at that point,
I would, if they don't,
it's tricky.
It is tricky.
You're reading the situation in real time.
You need to watch my dog with dog eval videos that I hope to send you later.
okay.
So if two dogs are growling at each other, I think it's important that they are able to communicate, hey, what you just did pisses me off. I don't like interactions that are, I like behavior change. So if you're growling for more than 3 seconds and one dog does not turn away to diffuse that conflict, I'm going to request it. And I'm going to call one of the dogs away to help that out.
So she's intervening at that point.
So and we knew we were going to do this, so you pretend to be a dog that has issues and I'm the happy, stupid. Okay? So I come up and I'm like, hey. Right? That was like really long. That was more than 3 seconds, right? And you know he's going to get pissed off because you see him growling and he's stiff. There's been no behavior change in him, so he's still feeling some type of way about me that I did when I first came over. And I'm stupid because I don't read a room, right? And I don't pick up on social cues, so that's where you need help by calling me away.
Manage the instigator.
Right. But that's the part is everyone thinks you're the instigator. Because I was friendly, you're the one growling at me. I think it's a lot like kids, so the annoying little brother that's tormenting the older dog. And so, so you call me away. So call me away, let me do something else, give the dog a break, and then let that dog come back. Hey! Snap. Oh, turn away, right? That's great if I turn away. That means that, okay, I am capable of receiving that message. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If he snaps at me and I go, oh, right? That's where you get some issue with conflict because I'm not diffusing it, I'm bringing the fight on. And that's where you continue to try and call him away, and I would take a longer break, and I might go back a step and do a parallel leash walk again. Okay? It's hard for me. It's hard for me to give you a straight up recipe without knowing the dog.
So that's the biggest point I think is having a trusted dog that you know communicates well or doesn't communicate well, and that's where you can get a lot of validity in going forward or not. You know, so
I think
having
that
that
mine
justification.
has just gotten to a point where he's not around dogs that much.
Yeah.
And He's very sweet now,
Yeah.
and he's not really reactive anymore. However, he has no idea how big he is.
Right.
He wants to play.
Mm.
Play.
This is your
Another-
dog?
My dog.
Yeah.
Another dog, say a smaller one specifically, does the whole well eye thing.
Yeah.
He'll freeze in the play now. They
Okay.
can't get too close and like have, you know, the
Something-
dog's corner is terrified.
Yes.
So at that point,
You
Yeah.
need to call your guy away.
right,
And you
okay,
have the right instinct there, I think.
okay.
Yeah.
Especially if it's something that you can predict. You know,
Okay.
if it's something that you feel this
And then start
happens.
over,
Yeah, you take the
take
steps.
it a little while, give him a little while, separate him, maybe put one in the backyard.
You might run your dog until it's exhausted so that it's not as forward, so it has less energy.
Okay.
You want to see a lot of space and symmetry in play. So if I come up to him and I give him a hug, right, there's not a lot of space between us. You want us to bounce back to create space.
Okay.
And then you want him to come back to me and give me a hug. And then, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So you don't want them to be on each other, because that's when you get escalated play too.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is 8 o'clock, so I'm sure there's lots of questions still, but I have to get home to my dog. Sorry, Anthony.
No, that's okay.
Um,
What we'll do is we will give Kelly and Stacy our emails. So if you guys have more specific questions or need us to come evaluate or introduce dog or whatever from here on, reach out. You know, we're more than glad to help you guys out. And we also want to be able to send you guys those dog-on-dog test videos. Because she does a really good job narrating.
yeah, sorry if there might be cursing in them, just so you know.
None of us would rescue dogs, they're even that.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, if you guys ever have questions, please reach out. And thanks for letting us come to them.
Thank you.